Climactic.
I used to share my thoughts on Reddit a lot, and I would just get downvoted or criticized or attacked by others almost every time. And it was like the more well thought out and logical my posts were, the harder I got attacked and downvoted. It made me almost start to devalue my own opinions. It started to make me dislike people, and I couldn't help but wonder who those anonymous strangers were in real life when I went out into society. It started to make me think that, deep down, everyone is truly awful. I had to escape from it. Just like almost everything about the year 2020, these frustrations made me want to back away from society, and instead just become a more introspective person in general. So in 2021, I decided to start writing a journal, and I wrote down almost everything that happened to me. Every day from January 1st, 2021 until the end of the year, I wrote about what I did with my days, what was happening in the world, what I was thinking at the time. First, I would write it all down in a notebook, and then I would record what I wrote at the end of each month. Then I would force myself to listen to the recordings. It was very cathartic and therapeutic at first, but what I didn't realize was how much it would change me. I started to notice that I was complaining about the same things over and over and over again. At first, I was mostly complaining about how I weighed a little too much and that I was in a bad living situation. And so then at the end of January, I recorded those thoughts and I was forced to listen to myself complain about them. Then in February, I did it again. Then by the time March rolled around, it was absolutely unbearable for me to write down those things again, knowing that I would just have to hear myself complain about the same things 3 months in a row. Why am I still here doing this? I wrote. At this point, it's just really pathetic that I'm complaining and not actually doing anything about it. So in April, I decided to start to change the story. The journal inspired me to change my behaviors. At first, it was just a 30-day discipline challenge to see if I could get my bad habits under control. I cut out alcohol, I cut out meat from my diet, I implemented intermittent fasting into my routine. I limited my time on the internet and I promised myself not to get into debates for that month. And the hardest thing for me to do was to get rid of drinking Pepsi, because that was a physical addiction. Not only did I do a great job of being disciplined that month, but I lost around 8 pounds too, which was never the initial goal. But I liked the momentum enough that I decided to just keep going. I kept doing this self-discipline routine for a total of 5 months, ultimately losing about 32 pounds and feeling like a different person by the end of summer. This was a much better story to put in my journal, a story of success. Although talking in depth about my diet and exercise routine got pretty difficult to hear about on a daily basis in its own right. But still, big picture, it was a much more fulfilling life that I had started to live. All because I knew that I would be forced to listen to myself complain about the same thing over and over and over if I didn't change something fast. But even after I lost those 30 pounds, the living situation was still awful. The downstairs neighbor was kind of a mean drunk, and I jokingly called the upstairs neighbor Thunderfoot, who walked like a dinosaur with ferocious, thundering footsteps. I used to keep a drink by my bed, just like in Jurassic Park, so that I could watch the ripples in the water, so that I knew when she was approaching. Just like T-Rex. And once again, each day in my journal, I started to repeatedly write the same thing. Why haven't I moved yet? So finally in August, I found a better situation to move into, and I took it. I moved out. And while this new living situation isn't completely perfect, and I've gained a few of those pounds back since August, my life sure is a heck of a lot better than it was 12 months ago. All because I started journaling. All because I was forced to hear myself admit over and over and over again how miserable certain aspects of my life had become. It wasn't always this way. The pandemic changed everything. I was never home all of the time like this before 2020, before the pandemic. So having crappy neighbors wasn't as big of a deal. Also, social distancing and shutdowns forced us as a society to reinvent ourselves. And in hindsight, I found that I was a little too slow adjusting into the right directions. In summer of 2020, I just shut down my Facebook account because I just couldn't deal with all of the political opinions anymore. In January 2021, I thought I was safe, so I turned it back on, figuring that all of the politics were over and things would go back to normal. But then the idiocy of January 6th, the Capitol riots, they happened almost immediately. And once again, Facebook erupted into politics. And I lasted less than a week on social media. But in that week that I was back online, I looked up an old friend to see how he was doing. And to my surprise, he was taking photos on the beach in Hawaii with his beautiful new girlfriend. WTF. Didn't he get the memo that everybody was supposed to be miserable and hunkering down? While the rest of us were fighting about the presidency and hiding in our caves, this dude was living a grand new adventure. You son of a bitch.
You sound bitter. This guy sounds great. But surely something interesting happened to you, right?
In spring of 2021, I bought a bird feeder.
Oh, that sounds amazing. Almost as cool as moving to Hawaii with a beautiful girlfriend. But please, tell us more about your bird feeder.
I think that my interest in birds peaked my first year of living in Cleveland when I forgot to put down my screen window, and a robin hatched 3 eggs in the nest, and I could just watch them hatch, grow, and then eventually leave the nest. And I don't think I'd ever seen birds that closely. I don't think I'd ever paid attention to them before. But with them growing up on my windowsill, it was hard to ignore. It was amazing. I loved watching them grow up. But when I got my bird feeder, I got visits from cardinals, sparrows, yellow finches, titmice, woodhatches, woodpeckers, an occasional blue jay, red-winged blackbirds, and, like a few other stragglers, like squirrels and chipmunks. One day I took my Bluetooth speaker out to the bird feeder and I started playing cardinal calls. I wanted to see if I could attract a cardinal. One quickly landed on the tree right above my head and obsessively called out, searching for his potential mate that had been calling out to him just a few seconds before. I felt horrible and I turned it off immediately. He wouldn't stop calling for her. He just kept trying to find her and just would not give up. I put myself in that little cardinal's shoes.
I think it's highly unlikely that a bird would be wearing shoes.
Even if he was, I don't think I'd be able to fit in them. And I thought about what it would be like if someone did that to me. Imagine if the neighbors set up a Bluetooth speaker on the other side of the fence and had an attractive sounding woman repeatedly shouting, "Hello, I'm an attractive woman over here and searching for courtship. Can any single males out there hear me? I'm single and I'm looking for love. Hello, are there any single males out there? I'm single and I'm looking for courtship. Do you hear me? I'm single and I'm looking for courtship." I'd be going insane, peeking through the fence trying to figure out where that sexy voice was coming from. I'd probably remember it for the rest of my life, wondering why I could never find that amazing sounding woman on the other side of the fence. I felt bad for Mr. Cardinal. I put the Bluetooth speaker away and I never did it again. Speaking of romance, I was asked to be the best man in my good friend's wedding. It was the first time I'd ever had that honor. One of the responsibilities of being a best man is to give a speech, a toast to the groom. I had no idea how to do that, so I went to Reddit and asked. Thankfully, some guys there steered me in the right direction of what to do and what not to do. I went to YouTube and I listened to a few hilarious best man speeches while I was hiking one night. And as I was walking, I thought of some of my own great ideas for the speech that I had to make. By the time I got home, though, I was exhausted, and I fell asleep and I forgot about it. And I had writer's block for the next couple of weeks. A few weeks later, though, it all came back to me as I was sitting in church, and I just started writing furiously. I didn't hear a single word that the preacher said the entire service. By the time the service was over, I had the entire speech written, and I went home and I recorded it. Then I shared it with a couple of people who I trusted to give me good feedback. They really liked it, they said, with a couple of small changes. The speech was really good. It was funny, it was heartfelt, it was emotional. But Here's the problem. I am a horrible public speaker. When I speak in front of a big audience, my muscles tighten, my voice gets squeaky, my stomach gets nauseous. I wrote a great speech, but this fear of public speaking was a big hurdle to overcome when the time actually came to give the speech. At the wedding reception, though, they called me up and my hands were shaking. I was holding both a microphone and the paper that the speech was written on, and everything about me was just shaking. I was worried as I talked that everyone would notice. But I slowed things down and I kept pushing through it. My stomach was tied up in knots. But then I told the first joke of the speech and the crowd just burst out laughing. That changed everything. Suddenly I was feeling good. I was enjoying it. I was killing it. I just kept telling jokes and the crowd just kept roaring. Then I calmed it down a bit and I talked about how the bride and the groom were both great people. And then I turned back to comedy and roasted the groom. Once again, the crowd started bursting out laughing. It was an amazing feeling. I closed it out with some final kind words and I made the toast to the couple. Then I went back and sat in my seat. People I'd never met before started coming up to me, telling me what a great job I did and how funny the speech was. And all of a sudden, complete strangers just seemed to want to get to know me. It was a good feeling. One of the groomsmen came up to me and told me that it was an amazing speech and that I'd even made the mother of the groom start crying, like in a good way. As I was sitting at my table waiting for the food to arrive and talking with the new friends I'd made due to the speech, I started feeling nauseous. I asked everybody at the table if they thought it was hot, and no, apparently it was just me. I was overheating from the stress and anxiety of the speech and started to feel like I was gonna throw up. I made it through the conversation at the table the entire time planning my emergency escape. Then when there was a break in conversation, I excused myself. I walked calmly but quickly outside behind the building and I started tossing my cookies. Blah, blah, blah. 3 times. Fortunately, nobody was out there. Nobody saw it. And then I had a few dry heaves after that.
TMI! Too much information!
Then I totally collected myself and walked back into the hall, went to the bathroom, cleaned up as if nothing had happened. Other than the nerves and the vomiting, though, what a cool experience it was to have that honor, to be considered that important to somebody that I'd be named his best man, and to make people laugh hysterically like that. In September, I took my first real vacation in over 4 years, exploring the trails of Minnesota's Lake Superior coast and the Sawtooth Mountains. It was a beautiful place. I took so many amazing photos, and I even framed one of them and gave it as a Christmas gift to a loved one. I'd never been to Wisconsin or Minnesota before, so there's 2 more states I can cross off my list. I'll probably do a separate episode on that trip soon if I can find the time, hopefully. I meant to already do it, but there's only so much time. What are you going to do? Well, those were some of the highlights of my personal 2021 journey. But the biggest thing of all is that I started a new podcast. This one called The Great Big Intergalactic. I kept procrastinating on launching it though. I kept waiting until the perfect time when I had an intro and a website and a closing song, and none of that was ready for the longest time. And it still isn't, not all of it. But I eventually just decided to throw caution to the wind and release the first episode anyways in the summertime, just to get it started, just to get it going. It's been a fun first season. I have no idea who any of the listeners of this show are, but there seems to be a few of you, a lot more than I had in my last podcast, at least from the statistics and the data that's been provided to me. If you've listened from the beginning, you probably know that this is an extension in some ways of my personal journal. So I tend to talk about whatever I'm interested in at the time in any given episode. And I appreciate those who contributed too so far. Lute and my friend Fred, and also my friend Derek, who actually contributed something already, but it'll be something that I release after the new year. I have a feeling that for me personally, 2022 is going to be a big year full of big changes. Again, it's that journal driving change, driving interest. I can't be boring anymore because I have to hear about it from myself, from my own words. The life that I live, I have to listen to myself talk about it. I hope you all had the best 2021 that you could possibly have. And even more so, I hope you all have a really amazing 2022. Happy New Year. See you next year.